So welcome everybody. We are live here with Event Marketing Redefined. And today we're talking experiential marketing, and we are talking the evolution of experiential marketing and how it rolls into kind of live events and the big role that it's playing nowadays. My guest is Joe Rivers from MC Squared. For those of you that don't know, MC Squared is a award-winning brand experience solution agency. They are an incredible company. They do incredible work. If you go to their website, you can see from the second you pop on that website that they do some really cool stuff. So Joe, welcome. Thank you for being here, my friend.
I appreciate it, Matt. Thank you very much. And I'm very excited to be here. This is great to be able to chat on this topic. I'm going to have to, I know I mentioned it to you, but I'm going to have to preface, these opinions and these thoughts I have are certainly my own. I'm not reflecting MC Squared, but we do some amazing work, and I'm very proud of what we've accomplished years before I joined, and even to this day now. So,
yeah, no, you guys do some really good work. So one quick thought that I want to start out with today is essentially that, and Joe, we talked about this prior to this, which is essentially that B2C does an incredible job with experiential marketing and kind of delivering that to their customer, right? And B2B just needs to catch up, right? Got so many B2B marketers, and B2B needs to catch up and needs to take a page out of B2C's book and essentially deliver more intentional experience to their customers at live events, activations, trade shows, on and on and on, whichever one you want to call it. I truly believe this. I wrote this note down here, and the more people I talk to on this show, which is a blast to do, and the more customers that we gain and we work with, and I have a little bit of touch point with, is people, they want value and they want experience. So your customers, they want value and they want experience. And I think that leads perfectly into what we're going to talk about with experiential marketing today. So let me just run through a quick definition. I'm a definition guy. I love them. It kind of clarifies things in my brain for me. Maybe I'm just not that smart, but best definition I found, there's a bunch, is basically creating memorable and innovative customer experiences to create emotional connection between customer and brand. I love that definition.
Joe, give me some. That's a damn good. Yeah, that's a good.
Yeah,
that's
it
a
is
good,
right?
I was gonna go more, kind of, I guess, more simple in terms of just, experiential is just having that multi-sensory experience that leaves a lasting impression. That's my go-to method of defining it, and I like that because it is the truth. Whether it's B2B, B2C. I once heard someone call experiential people to people, so it's just P to P instead of encompassing all of that. And I thought that was true. You look at what experiential has become over the years, and long before I ever got into it, and it was just always about creating that lasting impression for people. So if you go to an event or a trade show, what is it that you want? What is it that a brand or an individual or a company wants when people are passing through the aisles and going up into 10 by 10s, 20 by 20s, or 100 by 100s? It's always about, what do you want that person to lead with? And obviously it's a lasting positive impression is what you're aiming for.
Yeah. The impression word is interesting, with what you're saying, because I'm thinking I love that definition, right? Creating memorable and innovative customer experiences to create emotional connections between customer and brand, right? So that word connection is important. I see a lot of people utilizing it, but I think it can get lost when people say connection, right? But I think experience creates connection. When you experience things with people, right? So we've now experienced, or we will be experiencing this together. We're going to go through the act of doing this show together. So when we see each other in person, right, this experience will accelerate our relationship. You know what I mean? When we see each other, there'll be a different connection there. So experience does create connection, which strengthens relationships. And that's what brands are looking to do. So now it comes down to this idea of what is experiential marketing? How do you do it? How do you actually create experience for people? And I think, like I said, B2C does a great job. B2B needs to do a better job and take a page out of that book. So give me some thoughts. Let's get this going. Let's talk a little bit. about experiential, like where do you think in B2C, because you go to a lot of B2C festivals and concerts and events and things of that nature, like where are you seeing B2C really thriving with experiential?
Yeah, and honestly, I guess from a customer user experience, user journey,
Yeah.
and you go
Yeah.
through these festivals, whether it's South by Southwest, one that I've recently went to, and I was in Vegas for a client of mine, but I went to the Area 15 experience, and I wanted to go to, I
Yeah.
think it's called the Lost Spirits. It's where like the Meow Wolf experience is too. It's
Hmm.
really amazing. But I went to the Lost Spirits one, and it was a distillery that curated whole experience where you walking through and people were, their own characters, and there was tastings, and there was just rooms that were like dimly lit, but each room had some type
Yeah.
of activity that you would do or partook in. And it was amazing because it was so curated. Every single touch point was, particular and meaningful and
Mm.
purposeful. And I thought that was really key because I walked
Yeah.
out of there like, wow, that was awesome. I actually couldn't wait to
Yeah.
tell people about it. And that
Yeah.
is the definition of like leaving with a lasting impression, to tell someone, hey,
Yeah.
you got to go there. Like I have a friend that's in Vegas right now, and I literally told him, like, you either go to Meow Wolf or you go to this Lost Spirits. I
This is
didn't
where
tell
you
him to
go.
go to a casino.
Yeah.
Yeah, I didn't tell him to go to a
Yeah.
casino to gamble. I told him to go to those things,
Go. Yeah.
So
Yeah. I always use the example, and I'm sure, some people have been on this before, they've heard it, is like, I like hotels. I enjoy traveling. I enjoy going to different hotels. I enjoy boutique hotels. I enjoy, like all different kinds. That to me is an experience start to finish, from when you pull up to when you leave. And essentially it's like a feeling when you leave a hotel or when you're at one, like that good experience that you get, and kind of what you're
yeah.
saying about like Area 15, the feeling that you got. Now, yes, there's a ton of engagement in things in there, but like hotels, same thing, ton of engagement in hotels and things that they're doing to, give that experience. I think one thing that I keep thinking of, like somehow, and we're both trade show guys to a degree, right? I mean, we work in and around events and brand activations and campaigns and things of that nature, but a lot of trade show work. Um, Experiential kind of evades me when it comes to trade shows. It just does. It gets lost somehow. People are spending a ton of money for these spaces, right? Which is just like anything else. So why are like big brands, say like a Bumble, building a $1 million pop-up shop in Manhattan and putting all this thought, time, and energy into that experience, yet you have companies going to a trade show in a 600 square foot space or 1,000 square foot space, and they don't treat it that way? It blows my mind.
And we obviously have to give credit where credit is due. I know a lot of those brands have their specific messaging, and they're looking for maybe lead gen or an opportunity to have a private meeting. So while you're 100% right, and I agree with that, I'd also like to at least suggest that brands are doing those things because there's a purpose behind that, of like creating a little bit more of a siloed effect for what the space is doing, you know what I mean, or what the space looks like.
Oh yeah.
But I do agree there is that opportunity. I mean, I went to the National Association of Convenience Store, NACS, in
Yep.
Atlanta when I first started at MC Squared back in 2019. And I remember walking the show floor, and why this one still resonates with me, but it stuck with me. I saw the Krispy Kreme booth where they had a mini golf course, and on the golf course was donuts, like little mini, like, fabricated donuts. And why that one stuck with me, I don't know, but I just liked the fact that it was there. It was something to do. It tied the product, back into, hey, it's donuts on a mini golf course. But it worked. That was something that wasn't a wow factor per se, but it was something
Yeah.
engaging.
It's interesting you said that. We lost that bid to Chris.
Well,
That's so funny you said that. I think Molly's on. I think she's on here. She's dying when you said that. Or that was, I think Molly worked that. Like we lost that bid, or maybe it was Lance who worked on it. I don't remember, but we lost that bid. But yeah, I mean, it's funny, the interesting things that you see and that you gravitate to. I think what's interesting about experience is engagement. And we talked about this earlier. Everybody's looking for engagement. Well, like, I kind of break up engagement at times into two things. Visual is one for me, because you can visually engage people, which I think is fascinating. But that's typically not what people think. They think engagement, they think that like demos, presentations, installations of some sort, like physical type engagement, gamification, and things of that nature. Let's talk a little bit about the difference between visual and sort of like what we would consider standard engagement. Visual to me is like you've grabbed my attention with something. Like you've put some kind of piece in there that's just pulling at me. I'm like, wow, oh my God, it's engaging my eyes.
I look at visual as just one of those components from that multi-sensory experience. So if like you tie
Yeah.
someone in just from visual or audio, or taste or smell, like a lot of times that is just enough. I still remember reading about a case study from an agency that's no longer here. I think it was Fake Love, and they did something for a client of theirs that was people who were deaf but were able to go up on a stage, and they built this thing where it was all like haptic feedback, where you could essentially get the sound through, like basically the haptic feedback of like for someone that was deaf, but you could feel it. You know what I mean?
Wow.
And it was really interesting because for something like that to occur, for someone to have that experience, similar to just someone who obviously can just listen to the music, I thought was really fascinating.
I love that. That's perfect segue here, right? So I have this post that you posted on LinkedIn that I liked. I thought it was awesome. And you talked about 3 important elements to implement in experiential marketing to kind of push and create engagement with consumers and customers, right? So the first one you said is multiple sensory interactions, which is what you were just kind of touching on. The second was audience interaction. And 3 was emotional impact. Walk me through them a little bit. Let's talk about those. I think they're very interesting pieces there.
Yeah. Well, audience engagement's kind of almost a self-explanatory one, making sure you have your targeted demographic, your people that are attending the event, whether it's a festival, event, conference, whatever have you, is truly engaged. How many times have you probably seen, and you and I are probably culprits of it too, where we go onto our phones because we've lost the connection between what was happening.
Yeah, happens real quick. You get in that pocket.
You do.
You're like,
you do.
You get one.
And by all means, we are definitely distracted individuals these days. Like that's just kind of the nature of how we have phones in our pockets and all that stuff. But at the same time, that's why that audience engagement is so important, to just kind of be able to capture the person's attention and keep it going, from there. And then even further, the multi-sensory experience, like I was saying, if you can touch on one of them or multiple, I think that's huge. You're doing something. That's why I think when you go to some of these events, trade shows, if you will, there's a lot of those tastings, because you're doing something that allows them, hey, here's a sample of something. When I first got into experiential, I think I was called a brand activation manager, where you went to bars and you were like essentially mystery shoppers, and you were like paying people to try different beers. I thought it was hilarious that was a job, A, and then B, I was like, look, I'm literally just trying to get these people to taste a different beer. And that was that sensory experience.
What's funny about the sensory experience? So I don't know, let me cut you off 1 second. What's funny about that is I always think about when I'm a part of those. So where the dealership that I bought my car at, I bring it back for service probably once a year. I don't know, right? The one thing I notice every single time, and I can't figure it out yet, when I walk in those service doors, there's a smell that hits me. And it is like it is a wonderful smell. Maybe I should know my smells a little bit. It's fantastic. And it's so prominent. And it's like, this is purposeful without question. Right. It gives this high end feel. I don't know how to explain it when you're in there. And it always, I don't know what it's about the experience, but I recognize it. I know it. And there's something about it that I just like. So I don't know if it's a smell that they're like, hey, people love this smell, just put it there. But I think that is exactly like those sensory interactions.
I mean, this might be a bad example, but it still warrants the truth of what we're talking about. Abercrombie did it when I was a kid. I knew when I was walking past Abercrombie, because I could literally smell it. And I'm like, well, I know what this store exists. So
exactly. As soon as you walk in. Yep.
The third one, emotional impact. That one's profound. That one, you're going to hit people differently no matter where they are. It could be a certain stage in their life, could be how they're feeling that day particularly. It could be anything. So the emotional impact is always going to be different depending on that individual, and obviously the product or service that you're kind of representing or advertising. So if you're going into South by Southwest and you're, happy-go-lucky and it's beautiful out and you're walking into that Cheetos experience, that emotional impact is just going to be super heavy, and it's going to be amazing because you're like, wow, I get to try this snack, you know what I mean? So
Yeah.
I think it's really important to understand that that's going to be different for everybody, but also knowing that you do need to deliver an emotional impact.
Yeah.
And
You know what
and that goes to that one topic you and I were talking about earlier, about like a brand, you know, to listen to what their
Yes.
customers want, you know?
Yeah, my chief creative officer calls it getting intimate with the brand. That's what he loves to
Yeah.
say.
Yeah.
But he's right though. It's a matter of listening. And I think with emotional impact, what it makes me think is meaningful, right? Because emotions have meaning behind them. There's things, I think you said earlier, like when you walk into one, it's like it's nostalgia, or there's certain elements that evoke emotions from you. So as a brand, as a company, when you are exhibiting, when you are creating an event, when you are activating somewhere, whatever it is that you are creating, it's a matter of understanding, like, what emotion do I want my customer to have, if any emotion at all? Maybe it's just pure fun. Maybe you just want me to have the best time ever. We did a podcast, was it last week, about the activation that we build for Publix at the Tampa Bay Buccaneer games. I mean, it's a 5,600 square foot tailgate. I mean, it's not a ton of emotion going on there with how we connect Publix with their customer. It's just fun. It is just pure fun and entertainment, which is a form of that, right? It's a form of it. So you have to reverse engineer it. It's great to talk about emotions and sensory things, but you have to reverse engineer to, like, what do you want to deliver your customer? Then how do you deliver, and how do you make them feel such,
100%. I mean, that's why I always kind of talk about, and maybe this is kind of something that's said in every experiential agency or experiential department. What we're doing here is creating a fun experience for people. I mean, at the end of the day, that's like what we're doing. The creatives out there are thinking of these out of the box ideas to really get someone engaged. At the end of the day, it's just so that they can have a positive, fun experience. Usually is the case.
Yeah. I mean, one of the things that, we always do is we try to tell people, like, ideas are great and everybody has them, right? And again, we talked about this earlier, which is that huge companies, like Samsung, Cheetos, all these different type of people, essentially, when they have these massive budgets, like, and what they're capable of doing in these huge activations they put out, and it's experiential and these massive campaigns, like, they are the minority. There is a majority here in B2B brands and B2C brands that are smaller, a little more bootstrapped, or just not that type of business, like a Fortune 500 or something, and it's a matter of, how do they utilize some of these strategies? How do they become experiential at their user conference or at their customer conference where they host 50 people, And I think what we talk about all the time at my company when we're working with people is we talk about, like, really 5 things. We talk about the why. So it's like, why are you doing this? Let's start there. Like, we can't go anywhere until I know why you want to do this. The second piece is talking about the customer, the audience. Who are they? Why are they there? What are they doing here, right? You can go deep dive into personas and what they're looking for, all that. The third is the brand. Talk about your brand. Why are you different? What makes your brand you? Fourth is creating some goals and some objectives as to why we're trying to do this. And then from there, you can now go and map engagement, experience, emotion, and say, like, oh, well, they're here for this, and this is our value. And oh, we're at, we're outside of a concert, so we should do this. And, like, then you can connect ideas, but you need foundational information. So I think it's important. I mean, give some thoughts on that. I mean, what do you think about, like, smaller companies, bootstrap? I think you had a call earlier, you said, right? With asking questions. How do I do this?
Yeah. It was funny because it was literally this morning about someone asking, like, how can we deliver those experiences that you see, Samsung at CES, some multi-million dollar, a beautiful, amazing project and experience that you give to people. How do you replicate that on a shoestring budget? And there's no easy answer. I think everything you touched on right there is really the roadmap to finding out exactly how to create that experience for people. At the same time, maybe those necessary steps are also taking a step back and going, okay, well, maybe they just have to be light touch points. Maybe it just has to be something where you go up and you do a curated cocktail or mocktail for someone, you know what I mean? Or simple as, especially B2B, he loved this idea when I was talking to him about like, well, what if you had those cards that they're like the metal cards and you tap someone's phone and then the link comes up and you can go directly to just all of their contact information and LinkedIn profile and website. And he was like, well, that's way better than going out there and handing out a million paper business cards.
Yeah.
And I was like, wow, it was crazy to think that little experience, that little transaction right there had such an impact, you know?
Yeah, I think it's an important conversation, right? Because it's really, they don't teach experiential marketing. They don't really even teach event marketing. It's like, it's a difficult thing to learn. It's a skill that you have to evolve with over time. We had a conversation internally today, and I had it with you a little bit, which is from a lot of the event marketers and marketers that we work with, right? Executing trade shows, events, activations, everything. You have some that are extremely educated, completely knowledgeable, know what they're doing. And then you have some that are thrown to the fire that don't know what they're doing. And they're trying to figure this out. You know, they've been handed their company's trade shows with $250,000 budget and 3 shows or something. I don't know, whatever, you know, make it up. And it's this concept of saying, hey, events is a marketing strategy. How do you go get results? And I think the education on that is huge. A lot of people learn by doing. But it'd be great to see a little bit of education. You know what I mean? It'd be great to see people be able to, more CMOs, more VPs of marketing, sending their people that they're putting on the front lines of this to say, hey, like, I'm going to invest in you. I'm going to invest in you being able to do this better.
One of the biggest, at least kind of, it's a rewarding feeling for me because I was once a tour manager and I would literally go on the road and be that person that was the boots on the ground in the trenches type of thing. And then when you come over to this side of things and you understand what goes on behind the scenes and on the ground for a tour, it really lends a hand of like saying, wow, you're empathetic toward what the tour manager has to do or what the BAs are doing or what the brand is looking for. It's very good to have that experience where you actually did it yourself and then learning about it for sure. I mean, like I was saying, I fell into this industry in a very unique way and I was just like, yeah, I might as well give it a shot. And then you kind of go up the ladder here and come all the way to this point. And now I'm like, wow, I can't believe I didn't know that this existed prior.
Yeah. What would you say is like some practical advice that you would give to somebody that's interested in experiential marketing? Let's say there's a marketer that's on this call, right? That is tasked in live events and marketing for their own company. And I mean, what's some simple advice, some baby steps, or maybe just some ideas that they could basically take and be like sort of applicable to them?
Yeah, I would say a couple different things. And one, I know we were talking about this right before this started actually, is mentorship. I think finding mentors, especially if you're trying to find a particular niche that you want to get into. So that could be experiential, that could be something else, but finding a mentor really drives that passion as long as you find those ones that really want to see you succeed. I think it's kind of interesting when you can get multiple different mentors that are different, different parts of your life and stuff. So I encourage someone to do that. And then another is to experience and immerse yourself into different.
Yeah, that's great advice.
Things, I look at traveling as a big part of me. I had a friend, her name's Jessica Govan. She actually works in me too. And she helped write this post of mine that I eventually posted on LinkedIn a couple years back. And it was all about how my experience of networking, meeting people, and traveling was something that really made my passion spark and experiential, as well as learn what drives other people from a psychological standpoint. Like, why are these people doing the thing they do? Why are they choosing to go to this experience more? For me, traveling helped open my eyes to learning about that for different people. And you kind of sink yourself into different cultures that way too.
One thing I was thinking about, like practical advice. I love the mentorship. Find somebody in event marketing that's done it, doing it, good at it, and be like, hey, I need some help, right? Like, I'd love your thoughts. How can you get some mentorship? 2, what you said about is seeking out experiences. I think that's great as well, because that's essentially what you're trying to create. You're trying to create experiences. I think one thing I'd add into that is like, there's no magic bullet. There's no magic pill here to be like, oh, do this and your experiential marketing will be crazy. For me, it's knowing your customer, super deeply know your customer, your audience. You got to know as much as you can about them, right? So if that means you got to go to the founder of your company or to the sales team or to whoever, and you need deep dive and know them, it's like you can have the greatest ideas in the world, but if it doesn't resonate, if you can't create connection with them, with why they're there, what they want and what they're looking for, then I think you can really come up with ideas that just swing and miss all the time.
That I agree wholeheartedly, Matt. Again, it goes back to that genuine listening part. When I posted that a few days ago in my own mind, just thinking people need to learn to genuinely listen without the intention to respond, but to understand. And I think that's key. You know, if you're looking at something you're trying to do from a tactical perspective, listening to what your customers are wanting to do, wanting to see, to feel, I think that's key.
Yeah, I like that. The other thing I think you said is interesting that I want to come back to in terms of just advice for people is thinking about the senses in a live event, right? It's like maybe sometimes you could break your ideas down into senses. Is there an opportunity for smell, right? I talked to you about like the visual engagement, this eyesight that you catch with something. I know I just saw on LinkedIn, Impact XM, one of their designs won an award. It's for the company that has like the big 3D, like a brain almost, I think it is, for a company that has space. It's a great booth. And it is like, but it's nothing wild. It's not like some drip, but it's that visual of that 3D lit large brain or head shape or something. That is a visual engagement. You cannot walk by without seeing it. So mapping these senses and saying, I mean, feel. What can you do with feel? You know, I think a lot of product companies are thinking that, but utilizing senses in experiential and trying to come up with ideas that way, I think is really, really cool.
Yeah, that's important.
Where do you think experiential marketing is heading, right, in the next few years, and particularly at live events? I mean, where do you think it's going here?
Yeah, that's a good question, Matt. I went to Advertising Week last week, and there wasn't a lot. I mean, everyone was talking about the experience economy, which is funny to me because then there wasn't a ton of topics on experiential just as a focus, you know. And I've always been trying to tell people, and I think a lot of people do understand this, especially ones that are in VP roles or CMOs, that experiential is a component of the marketing mix. But I've definitely noticed that over the years it's becoming more prominent in campaigns. So, a marketer or a trade show manager knows that experiential is there and that they need to put it into a campaign, whether it's something to do with social, traditional advertising, whatever. Experiential sometimes encompasses the whole thing. And I'm noticing that that's going to become probably the norm as we keep going, like over the next few years. I could see the experience economy going further and further and further, where brands are essentially thinking about experiential, but from a holistic approach.
It's true. I mean, I make this statement all the time. I tell people when it comes to trade shows, you need to treat it as a campaign, not just a singular trade show, not just the booth that we're walking in or something. So I think it's just a great point. Kind of where it's heading is like the experience economy. Yes, like people are craving it. People do want experience, especially I would say sort of younger, right? Like Gen Z and millennials, and this sort of space is like they're spending money on experience.
Yes.
Like that's why South by Southwest, Burning Man, Essence Fest, right? Like they're these mixes. It's not a concert. It's like a culture festival, right? But they're providing this experience for people. So people are paying for the experience. So goes back to what we said earlier. If you're a B2B company and you're trying to market to your customer at a live event, give them experience. Don't just set up your stuff and think that you're going to close them in a sales discussion. They're going to walk over and your best sales person's going to wear them down, right? Like give them an experience, give them something that they're not going to forget.
And that's another thing, is giving them like some type of exclusivity. That's a big one. I've always noticed that, at least in the last 5 to 6 years, people always want to feel important, if that's the right way of putting it, and so they go, oh, wow, you're catering this thing to me. So B2B, B2C, what have you, it's always kind of nice to feel like, oh, shoot, this is the experience I'm going to get, and it's kind of unique to me.
Any other thoughts on what you see in the future, like where experiential marketing is going for live events? Anything else you're seeing?
I'm curious to see if events are going to get to like large large scale. I mean, I know we've seen some really large scale events ever since obviously the pandemic and everything, but I'm curious to see if it's going to get to these really, really large festivals again. And I hope they do. I'm just curious to see how experiential impacts it. You know, like at ACL, I was in Austin recently, not for ACL, but I was there at the same time that it was. And I had a friend go, and she sent me photos of like the Hulu Lounge, and it was a little bit smaller, super cool looking. I would have loved to have been able to walk through and everything like that.
Yeah.
But it was smaller, and I was kind of shocked. And then I had another friend of mine too, who we both went to Governor's Ball, and there was some really great, cool activations, but they were smaller. And I was like, oh shoot, like this is kind of hard to get everybody in there or have every single person that's attending experience it, because there's so many people now. So I'm hopeful, and I'm curious to see that as the future progresses with experiential, if more of these brands are going to do wide open spaces or more immersive environments.
Yeah. One of the things you said, to go a little bit backwards, talking about like sensory and emotion and things of that nature and kind of how people operate, is like, I've always used this concept of like Maslow's hierarchy of needs. Like that old triangle that they show you, right? Where they talk about like, you know, safety and love and things. And like, I still think when people are buying and they're consumers, like it's still, those needs are not just like when they walk out the door of a business and they're going home. It's 24/7, you know? So applying those concepts into what you're doing is something that I think is interesting with experience, because you're trying to make people feel a certain way. The other thing I was thinking, which is skipping from this, but is like people have an issue explaining experiential. I mean, I took myself and few of my team members to a conference, and it was supposed to be a lot about experiential and different things. And it was like very like nothing that was applicable. I don't really know how to explain. It's like people had a difficult time dialing into it, which is why I keep asking, like, what's applicable? What can you do? How can you manage to add this in? It gets experiential to me, gets very kind of like, it's just this buzzword.
Yeah.
But it's not though. It's not.
It gets a bit messy, like almost convoluted of like what the definition of it is. And I know we said it in the beginning, and it's hard to define. So it's hard to tell people. I mean, shoot, I still have people ask me what I do for a living, and some of them think I'm like wedding planners, and I'm like, well, that's far from the truth. So, but you know, it's what people have, like kind of that tendency to go, okay, so you put on events, but it's so much more, you know, and anyone who's in the industry knows that too.
I think what's like my point with this too is essentially, if you want to dive into this stuff, you can, like even a wedding, like you need to be thinking about mapping your guest's experience if you're really all in on it. And that goes into everything. So like what you talked about, a place that you go, Area 15, they've mapped the experience. When you go into Target, they've mapped, it's a retail store, they've mapped your experience. They know how to get you to spend more, right? They know how to make it convenient for you to get the things, right? So that's what I tell marketers is there's no magic bullet. There's no magic nothing. There's nothing we're going to say here. You're like, I'm going to take that idea and I'm going to take it and we're going to kill it. But it's, are you mapping the experience? I don't care if you're at a career fair and you're trying to attract people, like anything, map it, reverse engineer it, start thinking about like, okay, I'm this audience, I'm my customer. What can I do experience wise to engage with them further? What can I do that, you know, when they leave, they're like, oh man, who are they? Like, that was really cool. That was different. That was unique. I think people just, it's more experiential, is more of a mindset. You have to be thinking that way and trying to do it. And not everything's going to land. It's just not. It's not always going to be amazing.
And that's true too. Not everything can land. I mean, it's that emotional impact thing that I was saying earlier. People tend to have those emotions of, you know, love, nostalgia, hope, fear. Like those are those really powerful ones that no matter who you are, you're experiencing it, or experiencing one or many. And you could be going to a Nickelodeon experience and it's like, hey, here's everything that was back in the 90s. Well, you're about to get hit with a lot of nostalgia, and it's like, it works. And then sometimes you could get someone in there that's never watched a single one of those, or maybe the newer generation that never had that. And they're just be like, well, this doesn't do it for me right now. And it's like,
and that's knowing your customer.
Right. Right.
Right? I mean, if you're going to go nostalgia with Nickelodeon, like it's got to be a certain time frame.
That's
It's
right.
got to be a set, you see a lot of that now. Like you see a lot of things with like Nintendo and different things like that. Like I grew up with Nintendo, with Super Mario Brothers, you know what I mean?
Yep.
So, but it's like my dad, if my dad is your target audience and you do something, he's going to be like, I mean, I bought this for my son. You know what I mean? He's like, I have no feeling about this.
Right.
What's the next thing I want to get to here? Some stats. I think you gave some great stats, and I'm kind of a stat person, but I think when it comes to experiential marketing, there is a little bit of a shift here with live events and experience. Essentially, a lot of digital marketing is becoming super saturated. It is. Google, the search, the capturing, the ads, it's competitive, it's expensive. I told you we recently had a client who came to us that wants to pull money from digital to go to live events, which is typically the opposite. You're thinking that they're like, oh, I don't need to do an event, I'm going to go digital. But digital is getting really saturated, so people are looking for alternatives. And in events, people want experience. So some of these stats are interesting to me. So I'll just read some. 65% of attendees say that live events help them have a better understanding of a product or service, right? 91% of people say digital ads are intrusive, which I agree.
Yeah.
98% of consumers create digital or social content at events and experiences, and 100% share the content. 73% of millennials crave experiences that stimulate their senses. We were just talking about this. That's an interesting one. This one as well. A good brand experience leads to an 85% purchase intention and a 4-to-1 ROI. So now to marry on top of these, I did a little bit of digging, and this one I found I really like. And I think this tells a lot when it comes to experience economy, and the way how people appreciate is essentially 91% of consumers are more inclined to buy if they have participated in a brand activation or an experience. And I think the reason that is because they've created a connection. Once you've experienced something, right? It's like you're in the trench with it. You've done it. You've gone through it. And there's a connection there. Some good stats there. Any thoughts on those stats?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's the thing. I was trying to, it's funny, I researched so much before, right when the pandemic was happening. I remember I tried to grab as many stats as I could, because I always wanted to keep sharing that throughout those months where there was tons of uncertainty. And a lot of those stats have held true after so long of the pandemic has like kind of drifted away, hopefully a little bit. And what I find to be really kind of like interesting is that those stats have now increased. A lot of those percentages of like the things that are positive about our industry has only increased. I would argue people are having more buying power. I mean, there was just an article on LinkedIn this morning about how revenge travel has still been going as strong as possible, even though there's
revenge travel. What a term.
That's what it was called. And I was like, well, that's a term that I might use now. And it's just so true. People are spending a lot more on obviously going somewhere or having an experience, I mean, I think Disney is upping their prices again on their tickets starting next year, which goes to show you that there's demand.
Yeah. All right, we got a question here. Awesome. Dudley, thank you for the question. I love questions on the show. It's like my favorite thing to do. We got an incredible one a couple weeks back. I mean, I felt like we could have went on for an hour and a half on it because it was like super specific to product and doing something. But all right, so Dudley asked here, he said, being new to the experiential space, it's been a bit difficult to find a mentor. What advice do you have for someone attempting to execute that first event to be able to measure POC and begin building your audience? I'm not sure what POC is in this reference. So proof of concept, Dudley, thank you. Very nice. So in terms of finding a mentor, any thoughts, Joe, on finding a mentor in the event space?
Probably sounds cliche just from my own desire to use LinkedIn the way I do. But I really did just try to network myself. And maybe it lends a hand that I'm a little bit more extroverted. So like I get that energy from wanting to talk to as many people as possible. But I will say, I just try to reach out to as many individuals that I can, and at least the ones that I know would bring value, and I would bring value to them, because it's definitely a two-way street. Mentorship isn't always just like, let me take. There's obviously output there too. You're providing something to them. And I would argue that is just trying to find those individuals, reach out to them on LinkedIn. I mean, shoot, in today's world, you could probably reach out to them in Instagram too. As long as you're obviously being professional about it. But those are my methods that I always reached out. Or you go to as many networking events as possible. I mean, I grew up in a smaller city like Buffalo, and I had to try to find some there, and then eventually went to New York and other cities and found them there too.
So Pablo is screaming right now, Mr. Community, right? When it comes to something like this, essentially, but about finding your community, right? So for a person looking for a mentor, Dudley, I would say a few things. One is, I love what Joe said about finding people online, essentially, because community is so strong nowadays. Like, can you find an event marketing community? I mean, I'm hoping that we're building one here. We continue to have high attendance and people in these chats, and which is great. But essentially, like, even if you find content creators, people whose content you follow, right? Like, who is creating event marketing content, whether it's somebody like myself from the, I'd say, agency side, or whether it's somebody that's actively doing it, creating content. I would find someone like that, follow their content, and maybe reach out to them at some point. The other one is to find an event marketing community. And then essentially I would go to events. Like, where should you be at? I mean, Joe is a huge traveler. He goes to all different types, but like, are you going to event marketing conferences, event marketing summits where they're teaching this stuff, where people like you, Dudley, that's asking this question, where you can get educated, because you will meet people there, right? You will find people there that are like you, like-minded, like talking about this stuff. In a sense, that's where you can find somebody. Now, second piece of the question, like the structure and ROI and testing, getting up your first event or first activation or whatever it is up and running. Here's my first thing for you. And it's a bit of what we use as a framework. First, you need to know your why. Why are you running this event? Why are you creating this activation? Whichever it is that you're doing, why are you doing it? What is the intent? And that leads me straight to, what are your goals? Because ROI doesn't matter if you don't have goals. I don't know if it doesn't matter, but essentially you need something you're shooting for, in my opinion. If you don't know what you're shooting for, then it's hard to create something to go and try to capture it and then be able to say, hey, we were really looking to present to 400 people. That was our goal. We wanted to present to 400 people, and we wanted to get X amount of maybe demos or conversations or things or whatever it may be. And you miss that mark. Okay, now your question becomes, why did you miss that mark? Because I can tell you, first event, first time, first go through, not just going to nail it. This stuff takes fine tuning. Yep. It takes event after event after event. And I love the word structure, because I think that's exactly what events, trade shows, activations, summits, these things that are being created in campaigns are. What is the structure? How is it laid out? What is the experience like? Where do you need to make adjustments? I'll finish on this, Joe. You can hop in. Sorry, my brain's running, but eventually, like we talked about this the other day, we run, I mentioned a tailgate party, a big one for Publix at the Tampa Bay Bucks games. Well, we attend them and we adjust them, especially year to year. So we're watching them. So it's going to take a little bit of time, Dudley, to understand that. And then when it comes to ROI, I would ask you, what do you want? What is the ROI that you're looking for? What is the goal that you want? Because then you can kind of reverse engineer how you can find what I would consider positive business outcomes from the event. What do you think about that, Joe?
I agree with all that, Matt. I mean, I'm more on the, obviously, like, I'm not on the always execution side of it. Obviously, I am under the agency, but as an individual, I'm not always on the execution side. But I will say, having a run of show helps immensely. Developing that, making sure everything is knowing who's who and knowing where it goes and everything like that. I think it's super important to have that.
Nice. Dudley, you are super welcome. We love the questions. We got another question, Joe. We're gonna derail this thing because I love the questions. Anonymous attendee: with live events and considering the visual aspect of your booth, so we're talking trade show booth here, how can smaller businesses with less budget and space compete with larger brands that have the resource to create large displays to catch the eye and create a similar impact? Anonymous, I love this question, because I think, and I'll dive into this a little bit, is that at trade shows, I believe you are there You're aisle to aisle, competitor to competitor. There's bigger ones, smaller ones, slightly juxtaposed ones from you, right? But you're there to compete. You're there to differentiate. You're there to stand out. You're there to draw attention. So I think you have to ask yourself two questions, right? One is, what makes you different from the big boys or girls, right? Those large ones that you're talking with big budgets and building these immaculate things, right? What makes you different from them? What makes you different? You got to have some form of competitive advantage, right? Because big moves slow and small moves fast. It's just the nature of business and different things. So what is your differentiation from them is one question. The second question I would be asking yourself is, how do you want to position yourself in that market? Where do you want to be positioned? What do you want to be known as? What do you want to be viewed as? And then I would start creating a campaign and a booth around that. So does that mean that you're creating a theme? Does that lead your engagement with people? By being different, don't do what your competitors do. You can't keep up, right? You have to do something different. It's like guerrilla marketing. You have to think differently. You have to think outside the box. That's kind of where I'd start, Joe. I don't know your thoughts there.
Yeah. I guess I have a little bit of, I look at it from a trade show perspective a little differently. I know you go to a festival, and I remember seeing, I'll bring up South by Southwest again real quick, is just seeing what what Amazon Prime did, which was take over this whole space and had all these immersive environments and activities, and it was incredible. And then I went over and I saw the SoundCloud takeover. They did a whole restaurant like bar takeover, or it was more so a bar takeover. But I loved it in its own sense. They really identified what they represent and ran with it. So they looked at, okay, look, we just need some artists that would need to come up on stage and perform a little bit and have a little bit more of that, as just because of SoundCloud of what they are, like a little bit more of that grungy feel to it. And it was really cool. And it was much less than the Amazon Prime, that was from that type of perspective. So I look at it from a trade show and I go, it doesn't always have to be flashy. You just have to embrace what you truly are representing. And like a brand that maybe is a software, maybe there's a way for you to incorporate your like thematic elements of like the colors of your brand into the decor, something that pulls people in that way. It doesn't always have to be flashy, but just something that really kind of gives you that emotional impact.
So I think it's a great answer. And I think, for Anonymous, good question. And I think what you said, Joe, kind of ties into what I said, which is like almost sometimes what makes you different is what makes you who you are, and double, triple down on who you are. Right. Which I love, because I think you have to show up that way. Another thought I had, Anonymous, is essentially like throw an event, make it invite only, right? Do the sort of ground and pound work of getting those events out, getting them to the right people, making them personalized, right? It's seemingly almost like the art of war, right? Like you're on the trade show floor, there's a bigger, badder opponent that's there. And it's like, how are you going to win? You have to do things differently. You have to think outside the box. I always like, can you create intimacy with your customer somehow? Is there something you can do from an engagement standpoint that is a little bit more intimate? And I guess what I mean by that is like personalized, right? It's more personalized. It sections out time with them. I would be thinking in that space as well.
And being present. I know being present is huge. There's people that are always like hesitant. Do I go to that trade show? Do I go to this event? And I'm not saying, you got to allocate an entire budget. I understand those are hard, and especially right now in this economy. But being present, trying to get in front of your, the people you're obviously either selling to, your customers, whomever, you want to get in front of those mentors, try to be present and actually be there,
Harry Pittman actually answered and said, make sure you have the right marketer in your booth is a big part of it. I couldn't agree more. Having the right people inside your exhibit is a very big piece to all this. We actually have another question, Joe, from Hannah Phillips, is what has been your favorite experiential event you have either worked on or attended? What made it stand out?
Yeah, I will say probably one that still resonates really, really hard with me is, I went to the Firefly Music Festival back in 2015, and I was a tour manager for a wine brand, and they were the official sponsor for that festival. And I still remember having the exclusivity of like having that VIP pass and working it and being, the person that was managing it. I was able to go up on the stage where the Killers were performing. And
Oh, love
I
me
mean, I
some
wasn't,
Killers.
yeah, and I
Man,
mean,
it's good stuff.
I wasn't like on the stage with the Killers, but like
Yeah.
I was in the behind the scenes looking at what they usually see. And I was like, wow, that would transform anybody. I mean, now I get why people who go up on these stages and perform, it's probably such a euphoric feeling.
A rush.
Yeah,
Yeah,
rush,
euphoric is
adrenaline,
for
you know.
sure.
And so that was something that really hit me.
What do you think made it stand out to you? Was it that feeling that it gave you? Was it, I mean,
yeah, and
anything
I
specific?
think that's exactly what it was. It was the feeling of whoa, like this is real. This is one of those moments where you had live in the moment. You don't think about the past, don't think about what's about to happen in the future. It's like you're truly present because you're seeing this, listening to the music. So it amplified the sensories like crazy, you know what I mean? And that's something that was really impactful for me. And that was the one that I worked. One that I've attended, I had the chance to go out to Art Basel in Basel, Switzerland, and I have a close friend that is from there, and he was able to kind of bring me and really, he gave me that curated experience of like walking through Art Basel, but also Basel, Switzerland. And I think that really impacted it like all around, because I was just like, holy crap, this is amazing to see Basel, the city, transform, and then see this event also transform the city itself.
That's cool. I would say one of the things that I think for me, it was impactful, I think is interesting is, I don't know if everybody knows, obviously Dallas Cowboys, AT&T Stadium. I went to AT&T Stadium to go see a football game, probably about maybe 6 years ago. It was right around the time that they're building these new stadiums, these new experience stadiums, and the way they're built inside and the fields are built into the ground. And it just blew me away. It honestly did. Like, I wasn't really even ready for it. I'm a big sports fan. I go to a lot of events and sporting events and things. So I would say, I know that doesn't answer a term experiential event, but it kind of is. Like, football's becoming an experiential event. It's not like when I grew up and I go to a Giants game with the spiral stairs, you're waiting for hours, and then the seats, and it's cold and it sucks, you know? It's like, this was totally different.
If you want to know what a tailgate experience is, I'll help.
Oh, here you go, the Bills games. Yeah, you find a way to mix the Bills in. And then I'm trying to think of like, what has been your favorite experiential event that have either worked or attended, and like what kind of made it stand out? Something I'm trying to think. I think one thing I would talk about is, and I've mentioned this a few times, and I'll go to a trade show example, is at the Kitchen and Bath Show, right? IBS and all that last year. Monogram, their exhibit, I think they're a sector of GE, right? It's like an upscale appliance. I talk about this exhibit all the time. It was awesome. I don't know who built it. If you're out there, nice job. Really, really great job. But the way it was built and laid out, but in the front of this exhibit, it was pretty large. I'd say it's probably a 30 by 40 space or so. It had like a private red rope that you walked in and went to the back, which was just intriguing to me, right? That like exclusivity, like what are they doing back there, right? Like what's happening? But then in the front, they had this probably 200 square foot section, maybe 150 square foot section. And it looked like this beautiful kitchen. It was just a beautiful kitchen. And there were people sitting at like an island in the kitchen. There was somebody with a headset on, and they were wine tasting. So appliance company placing their appliances in a kitchen, right? For context, and running people through this kitchen experience. They had like charcuterie boards, things on the table. I thought that was experiential. I really love that. And they were taking people through an experience there with, I don't know, maybe their appliances, maybe some wine tasting, maybe just bottling the whole thing up together. And what made it stand out was that kitchen was not hidden, not tucked. It was out in the open for everyone to see. It was almost like a TV set. Really loved it. We have more stuff coming in here, Joe. Hold on a second. Hey guys, Simon, this is a question, not Q&A. Okay. Just wanted to ask, how are you envisioning the somehow futuristic approach of the experiential advancements in terms of neurodesign, programming, emotion triggers, usage of AI to build up more impactful customer journeys? Since it's already happening, do you think this is the moment where the experiential will lose its soul? Or maybe this is something that we should all empower and try to use it to create even more memorable experiences.
So
Simon, that's an
Simon,
interesting question.
Simon, I know Simon well, and
Okay, that
this
is
is
quite the question.
this is a good question. This is one that taps into the soul of experiential. I don't even know if I have a great answer for that, to be honest.
Yeah.
But I do think we need to embrace that. I do think we actually have to create more of those memorable experiences and utilize those different tools. If you will, I'd like to look at it as like the experiential is the tool belt, and all those little different things, whether it's
Yeah.
AI or emotional triggers or the neurodesign programming, are the different tools itself. And you try to utilize each different one.
Simon, it's an interesting question. And I think my one thought on is essentially that, like, you know, one thing I've learned is, or that I believe is, that technology doesn't really go backwards, right? It only goes forward. And it's just a matter of the speed in which it goes forward. So I think what Joe said is true. Like, you can't deny it. It's going to happen. I don't think experiential will lose its soul, because I think you're seeing it even just in the example with COVID, right? People got all in the virtual and they were home and everybody was digital and it was hoorah on the digital. But inevitably, people want to be face to face. Inevitably, people want to experience things together. They want to feel, they want to touch, they want to hear, they want to physically do things. I think AI can do some cool stuff. Neurodesign programming is out of my pay grade. No, I mean, I kind of have an idea what it is, but it's out of my pay grade. Emotion triggers, I would say most people are just pretty much triggered in general. So I don't know exactly what that is, but in terms of AI and customer journey, it'll be there.
Yeah. And I think saying about those customer journeys, I understand having all those different, again, those tools, those tactics, it's imperative to what you want to do when it comes to an experiential marketing project or campaign. I say utilize AR, utilize VR, utilize AI, utilize anything that you can or that makes sense to, that will really drive that emotional impact again. That's an important piece.
So Harry said here, exclusivity and fully immersive, especially engaging the different senses, seems to be the theme to these memorable events. Thanks. Harry, thank you for showing up. Glad you took that from that. Hope you enjoyed it. We got one more question, Joe. It's from Dudley again. Where do you see, or would you like to see in the world of experiential marketing going in the next phase of the internet and technology, Web3, AR, VR? So Dudley, it's already here. It's already happening. You already have hybrid style events where essentially companies are marrying the physical experience with the digital experience. The AR, VR thing is extremely interesting. And I'm seeing a lot of different stuff. And I think people are going to create some really cool virtual stuff. Like, we have created some for clients that they essentially are using as a sales and marketing tool pretty much year round, but then they're also tying it into their events. I think you're going to see a mix. It's what I think. I think you're going to see people trying to really explore Web3, virtual, and a virtual connection. It goes back to that whole gaming thing, right? These people with these headsets on and they're gaming all the time. It's a whole world that they're in together, but they're in that world together, sort of in that metaverse, right? But also marrying that to the physical. I think you're going to see a marry of them for sure.
That one's a little outside my expertise when it comes to Web3, and that's my own doing of not knowing enough about it. But I will say, from following different news articles and just posts and people and stuff like that, I agree with you on how it's combining all of that.
Yeah.
I feel like everything is coming together in a very hybrid like manner, you know, so whether it's Web3, AR, VR, any of those components or tools or tactics, it's giving them a shot and integrating into something experiential, something immersive.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah.
Good question by Dudley. And Dudley, I think, I do think, like, you have to be trying to engage people in AR and VR and virtually, right? Because there's opportunity there. There are companies that are doing it. They are creating engagement. We had a company ask us to basically create a virtual, you call it platform, or I call them virtual experience, that essentially they use in their recruitment for staff and team members. Very interesting the way they wanted us to do it in the execution and the discussion. But I think it also ties into, it is physical and virtual. You're trying, how can you marry them together at an actual event per se?
Right.
Awesome questions. We still got 20 people on, which is awesome. Thank you all for hanging and staying with us. Joe, I'll kind of give you the floor, just some closing thoughts here on experiential. You know, I mean, it's a passion of yours. You love it. You travel, you're going to events, conferences. Just give me some closing thoughts.
Yeah, I mean, I guess again, it goes hand in hand with what I tend to live by. I kind of measure life by experiences that you have. So I truly enjoy going to these events and these things, and I do it in my own spare time, and I try to share it with people because, look, I've traveled solo and it's fun, but traveling with people is definitely the more memorable route to take. And I say the same thing about these events and these pop-ups and these trade shows and any type of experience. It's always just so much better with someone. So I look at all this stuff and it's been a part of who I am, and I think it's shaped me into a better person. So I find it to be a great outlet for me to go to these experiences and check out these things that people have created and things that we've done from literally our mind. We're imagining these things and then someone is bringing it to life. And I think that's really, really, really cool and really different.
Yeah, no, I think it's cool. You go to all these different things, you're seeing it, you're experiencing it, you're feeling it. You're then, I think, able to help people even further when they're coming to you looking to have these conversations. You know, some of the things I thought here towards the end is just how experience comes in all forms, right? But it has to be valuable. So for everybody that's on this call, that's still hanging with us, essentially like fun, education, surprise, immersion, physical engagement, visual engagement, right? Like all of this stuff, like experience can be sort of almost anything. And I guess my big overarching advice is it needs to be an experience for the people that you're creating it for, not for you, not what you think is great. So know the customer, map the experience, make sure you include senses, make sure you think about the emotion, how they're going to feel, make sure you understand the context of the event, right? You don't want to get like real deep with people when it's at an event that basically is not that vibe, right? You want to make sure you're matching the tone, right? Joe, this was fun, man. This was a really cool conversation.
I enjoyed this immensely. So I thank you, Matt, and I thank everyone for obviously listening in. This is it's great to talk on this topic, especially as it I guess it kind of sounds cliche because it's the title of it, but as it evolves. I definitely appreciate it.
Yeah, this was good stuff. I really enjoyed it. We had a great turnout today. Thank you, everybody that came in. I mean, we got a lot of people here still, which is great. So thank you for coming in. This is Event Marketing Redefined. We will be live in 2 weeks. If you want to connect with Joe, Joe is on LinkedIn. He's very active. He's got some great content, great posts. He posts about his travel. If you want to connect with me, I am on LinkedIn. And essentially, check out the podcast. We've got a bunch of episodes on all kind of event marketing, experiential, trade show, brand activation. It's all there. This will be out, I want to say like a week and a half or 2 weeks or so. This will actually be live on a podcast. And thank you for being with us. Absolutely appreciate everybody spending time out of their day to be involved in this conversation. And as always, I hope that at Event Marketing Redefined here, that we brought you a ton of value and that you can now take these things and go advance your own event marketing. So thank you very much for being here.